Hello. Um, I made a video about this earlier, but I wanted to share more progress on a text adventure I've been writing using an LLM as the kind of core driver, um, but with a lot of ideas and things that I think are novel and interesting and could be useful to build on. I'm not working on it any longer, but um, it's kind of why I wanted to just throw it out there, and you can get some ideas from it. And it's also open source. Um, I'll put that in the notes as well. It's all out there. So maybe you would want to make something out of it yourself or use some of these ideas. It's kind of a chance for me to unpack some of what I've done here and share it, even as I have now other priorities to keep me from if I'm working on it. Um, this will be my typical low quality production, but hopefully you'll be able to follow along as I kind of show you how it works and how it works on the inside and the prompts and all that kind of stuff. So this is a text adventure. I made this for a hackathon. She won the hackathon. That was nice. Um, and kind of in the style of the old text adventures. Um, it's a little different than say a lot of AI-based kind of like storyteller role-playing things. AI Dungeon's kind of a classic example. These are really like collaborative storytelling. In these things, you have like the story that comes out, and then you just like participate in the story, and you kind of do it from like the perspective of a certain person, but really you're just co-writing it. It's a little bit like uh, a regular tabletop role-playing game in person, um, but with a dungeon master that is easily deceived and gaslit into all sorts of things. If you want to explore prompt hacking, these collaborative stories are like prompt hacking as a fundamental process. Um, so this is like grounded in a little bit more like actual game state, as well as having then the LLM manage a lot of how these things transition. Um, this is the beginning here. See this. This is my little pre-written thing, and then from here on out, it is the LLM making this. Um, this was initially made with Google Gemini when they had a free, relatively generous free tier, but that was like eliminated right as I was writing this. It felt kind of like a rug pull. Um, Now it uses OpenAI, so this is a hosted website, but really everything that happens here goes has no real server side. It's all stored in local storage in the browser, the game state, and primarily I'm using Open Router um, for models. I'm going to use Gemini Flash, which is quite affordable, and I found it actually works quite well. I've been impressed with it, even though I've only like started using it today on this because I'm revisiting this. Open Router is a service that you can go. Here, I'll redo this. Um, you can basically you pay Open Router some fees for paying for models. It's pretty much the same cost as if you went directly to the model provider. Almost always identical cost. Um, but then you kind of pay them, and then the website accesses the models through there, and so you're paying on behalf of the on behalf of your own use. Um, so I haven't seen as much as I would like, but this is, I think, an excellent opportunity for people who want to make an AI-based hobby kind of tool, and they don't want to deal with the costs or have to like put out a lot of money for model costs themselves. Um, and you can use it through here. And you also it makes it very easy to try all sorts of different models. So you can use all the standard GPT ones, you can use Claude, etc. Um, but but yeah. Um, and this has all been built. This particular game has been built to be fairly model agnostic and using kind of a lowest common denominator um, of that. So here's the first AI response. And to give you an idea to go right into it, here is the log. Now this will always have spoilers because the log includes all of the internal game state that you show the LLM. But this is an example of one of the prompts. So this is what's called the system prompt. This is where the developer talks to the model essentially and says like, here's how you should behave. And then as you go down, you'll see some back and forth because it was built on Gemini. Gemini is very picky about how these things are set up. Ironically, it actually now it's built on the Gemini API translated to the OpenAI API, which OpenRouter in turn translates back into the Gemini API. If I was doing it again, I would for sure use the OpenAI as the core model. Um, so you happen to have to start with a user one, which because there is no user message, I put in a fake one there. Um, so this is what traditionally in a prompt would be something that the model had already responded. I just use it for anything that is already like established computer-based events. So there'll be a lot of model messages. The model may or may not have actually generated this. It may not have generated literally what it is. You can put anything in this history in this prompt. You do not have to be faithful at all. You can tell the model things happen that it never generated, and that's fine. Encouraged, I would even say. And there's not much history here. Right now, there's only this like one thing that's happened up to this point. This prompt is the one that generated this stuff right here. So there's very little history. And then here is a user message, which again is actually written by me, the programmer. I put it as user in part because Gemini has limitations on system messages, which other providers do not have. Um, but also, I think it's kind of accurate in that the user, in this sense, is not the player. The player is another entity, and the user is the game. Um, and an important part here is like LLMs, they will always try to be helpful. And so you want to direct their helpfulness towards your ultimate ends, which in especially with something like a game, are not actually being helpful towards the player. The player, you're supposed to kind of be difficult with them. Um, so we use that perspective to direct its helpfulness towards making a fun game, not towards being helpful towards the player. Um, and look at right here up at the top again. Um, so here's like the basic context of the game. Um, this very beginning part is an important part that establishes a bunch of things. Here's a bunch of context. This is automatically generated. There's relatively little context here at this moment. The character description, which Amma, you're playing for Amma. Amma is this uh, cloyingly positive AI that's in control of this place that you have ended up. Um, and then it has role-playing instructions, which can also get overwritten. These are specific instructions for Amma about some of what she knows about and um, things like that. And then for the other players, player is the only other player. Um, and then a bunch of instructions about how to produce a response. So the response is going to be here. There's a couple different things that can happen in the world. One is dialogue, which is just you're saying something. That's happening right here. And there's a description of something that happens. And there's a couple other things that we'll see as we go on. Um, so there's a bunch of stuff about how to do these different things. Um, and then anything that's really important, you want to do at the top and the bottom. So of a prompt. So again, as I say, at the bottom, I've put this user message, which is actually more instructions because I want it to be right there to say like, really do these things. Also, this is a really important part here, which is what I call guided thinking process or maybe a thinking template. It's a little like chain of thought, except chain of thought is just like think whatever you want to think. Here I'm saying like this is exactly what you want to think. You want to think this thing and answer these questions. So I lined up a bunch of questions. This is a really powerful technique to make the LLM pay attention to things. Um, it's one thing to do instructions. When you ask a question and force it to answer the question, it's like times two power in terms of instructions. Um, because once it's like answer that question, it has to go along with its own answer, right? And it answers yes or no, whichever way it answers, like it's going to pay attention to that thing. Um, so these are kind of standard questions. Depending on the context, they can get some additions and stuff. Uh, so let's see what special questions are something that doesn't fall in here, but sometimes there are special questions that are mentioned elsewhere. Uh, here's an important and interesting one. Are there facts that had to be constructed to continue the scene or response? Um, so I put this one in because there were circumstances where uh, there was unestablished, physical realities, because like we haven't like specified everything about this world and everything that's around, and so you just like invent things. Um, but why and how does it invent those things? Like we want it to invent things, but we don't want it to invent them in an unfair way in some sense. So like imagine you're doing like rock paper scissors, right? And the user says rock. Now, if you do it from just a narrative necessity, you say like, well, do I want this other character to win or lose? And then you say that the character chose paper or scissors based on whether the narrative implication is that they should win or lose. That if that comes out and it feels like a little fake in all these like little ways. And so here we before we try to get to like the character's perspective, we say what is the reality of the place, um, and it's a little bit more objective as a result. And that's kind of an important way to make things feel a bit more real. Now you could actually do this in an entirely separate prompt and then really separate like the narrative part from some of these core facts. But I find this is good enough for a lot of stuff. Um, then here we say what is the character's goals? Again, we want to like they have an internal desires that they're trying to operate on, and you want to keep those focused even if they aren't always exposed in the dialogue. Uh, and then relevant facts from history. This is basically like there might be a long history back here, and um, too much for it to keep track of. This is a way to like ask it to like pull together a few things that actually matter. Uh, poor man's um, retrieval augmented generation. And then here, often an LLM can do the most obvious thing. But this is a game. It's supposed to be silly. This is a silly world. How can this be fun and surprising? So try to ask it to like consider that. And then again, this is another kind of internal. What's this character's internal reaction, separate from how it externally reacts. Uh, and then intention, which is again before we get the particulars of the exact words you say, what is the intentions behind that? Again, to try to like make it more salient or relevant or what have you. Um, some more information, and then in this case, this is particular to the intake process, which is when you're beginning the game and a bunch of stuff hasn't been established. Is that we ask it, you need to figure out who you're talking to, what their name is, pronouns, things like that, um, and then special things that you would omit to um, get through there. And here's a checklist that represents how that progress is happening. And so we ask for the pronouns, name. Um, you know, pronouns have become like a whole thing lately, which is absurd. But they're especially salient to an LLM, which in fact does not care about uh, anything biological. It actually cares exactly about language, and pronouns are exactly about language, and so they're exactly appropriate. Um, that is true in a lot of the world, and it's let's not fake ourselves out by listening to people who, yeah. Um, so, and there's actually more things. I don't tell it to do everything because if I give it the complete list of instructions, it'll get ahead of itself. So, getting it through this is surprisingly difficult. So there's a lot of instructions just for this intake process. So now we're gonna go here and say, what's my name? My name's Ian. All right. And what are my pronouns? He, him. let's see if that works. Okay, that was my name now. Let's see, update there. On the checklist, that double check is for the pronouns. Um, all right. Uh, and if you look at the output again here, right, it has this combination, it has these answers here. It's playing along, and then you see it has this sets, which update the game state, and then some additional dialogue and stuff. And if we look up here, we have actually the whole game state for the whole thing. These are all the entities in the game. This includes locations, it includes um, some plot lines, and includes all the characters. Here's my player. And this just shows the override. So these are the things that have been changed about this. And Amma also has these things that are specific flags that have been created for the purpose of doing this intake. All right, what's the Amma introduced herself. Now just and include both these. So I'm going to show one of the ways that I try to make this a little bit more objective and not just a collaborative storytelling thing is that you never actually get to operate directly. And here, so there's a whole prompt every time you type something in, and the first times they were very literal because it was fine. You can say whatever you want. But there's a whole prompt here that is how to interpret the text that you put in here. And the text you put in here, so again, you're an assistant. Here's the player. This is all custom prompt for this. Um, here's where the location is. Here's the other characters that are around because you can speak directly to people. And so if you say like, tell Amma go away, it should know that Amma is a character. Um, and you can also go to different locations. At the moment, there's no other locations to go to because you're in this process. But so it parses it into something. Looking at things is also treated somewhat separately with a different prompt. And you can, speak in general, or you can speak directly to someone. And it goes through here and gives you a little bit. This doesn't have a full history. It has like a much more abbreviated history. And then finally, it also has a thinking process, which is actually pretty important. So things like this is important to really forcing it to do the proper location things. So it goes through, answers this, and says, I want to get out of here. And then here it actually appropriately said, I do an action of shaking my fist. Actions, there's an action resolution process, which was not necessary. It should have identified that I'm able to shake my fist without like rolling any dice or whatever. But instead, it actually decided I should roll dice, and then it went through this. So, very absurd. But I did succeed at it. My roll of 13 was good enough. I don't know. I could have had a critical failure there. That would have been amusing. Um, so yeah. And then here now, this is like um, a little plotline element where it talks about how old I am. Turns out I'm 328 years old. That's not how old as I feel. And then you get this flashback, which is again some pre-written dialogue to establish that you used to be. Um, the last thing you remember is from the year 2038. And then and maybe I believe also talked about dissociation, which is an important, which is a plot element to say that you feel like you aren't controlling yourself directly. You're just giving commands to yourself, which is literally what's happening. But then we create an in-game idea of this. But we have one more question. What's my profession? I'm a fungus farmer. All right. And if everything, perfect. I'm a fungus farmer. It agrees. It recorded that. And now we're done with the intake process. Um, and now that we've gone here, now we have proper exits and stuff. So you can see a map. The map only covers the places we've been to. Um, and yeah, so let's go out there and we'll see what's in this world. We've encountered a person. So if we look here, now we'll see a prompt from Marta. It's very similar to the one for Amma, but it says who the character is, the character description. Now it has somewhat different role-playing instructions about tone and stuff. I try to have pretty strong instructions about how they should talk so that they each talk somewhat differently. Um, and then you get a lot of the similar stuff of here's the context, here's what's around you, here's, and then this history is the history from this character's perspective. So there's essentially one giant history log of everything that happened. There's an initial state to the world, and then all these little items which can update the state and provide context. And then when we have a character, we go through and we filter out what is this character experience as part of the game, as opposed to what is. So they only see the events that happened around them. And really, there's this whole world kind of. It's not like a huge world, but there's a world happening. And so I'm going to show some of that. Here's a little debug mode, which shows you kind of the internals of this whole record. This is a whole bunch of game initialization stuff that's happening. Here's some of those context questions. Now, if we look, this is the context from that parsing step. So see some stuff like here's a character that moved around. They each have their own little like schedules and stuff that they're doing, so we see them moving around all the time, even though you wouldn't see them because you're not literally there. So it's keeping track of where each person is to give their perspective as well. And here's what happens when I open the door um, and allowed you to get out into the foyer. I was not actually supposed to do that. I was supposed to have to work to get out of the foyer, but um, did not work that way. um, so uh, now I'll do something. Let's see if this works now. When I was initially doing stuff with Gemini, it's gotten better. It had such strict restrictions that even role playing simple things like trying to be mean were um, would fail. So this is an action attempt. Let's go up to the top here. Here's the action. So um, here you're being an objective and fair game master. Um, and I thought I actually had this genre information in all of the prompts, but clearly I didn't because we looked at some of the other ones. They didn't have that. So this kind of gives, again, the basic context of the world and some of the stuff leading up to here. And then here is the action, right? So, um, oh wait, I can't get out of here, but yes. So they wanted to take this action. I attempt to punch Marta. Now that I said just punch Marta, um, but that was translated to attempt by the parser, which was appropriate, should be. Um, there is a special trigger in here, but it does not apply to this. And so I rolled a 2, and it doesn't have to use that, but we just kind of give it a roll. I think I can, if I remember correctly, I can say, uh, let's see, I'm going to undo this. Now, undoing works really well because of the fact that this is all a stream of things. But there's a whole, again, this context um, setting. So it does, if they try to do something impossible, just reject it. If they try to do something super easy, then don't worry about the roll at all. Uh, before you see whether they succeed or fail, just like before where I had like, what are some established facts? Here I want again for it to establish the idea of what success and failure is before I actually succeed or fail. Um, and then establish how hard it is. And in another game, I've made an even more involved system about heart and about skills and stuff. Here it's pretty casual. And then finally use this roll um, to do it. And then this thing here is like pay attention to this thing up here. So how it and then action and resolution. So it says yes, it's possible. It's not trivially easy. Success it would not be good, but I would actually achieve it. Difficulty medium with a little reason of why. And so I fail. And so it says success, false, and then we are always keeping track of time. About an hour and 12 minutes has passed. Uh, and that's the resolution. Now, if I remember correctly, can I do? So I think that'll give me a critical success. Oh, critical failure actually. And then I can say, and presumably I will achieve this. Of course, to what end? This is terribly mean of me. Um, but obviously that roll override is there for testing, not otherwise. Um, well, she's being quite nice. Here's where if I expand the game some, I would. I'm going to undo that. This is mean. I don't want to hurt anyone. So here I'm going to switch to a critical failure, and I'm going to say, yeah, I can just click on here, but really clicking on it just does a command that says go there. I try the door, it doesn't budge, it's locked. And I'll say unlock the door. This is supposed to be a super easy task that you just have to try it all to succeed. And maybe even with, I'll see, did it save my roll of 20? Here's my critical failure. Decided to ignore the critical failure because I have very clear instructions that it should be super easy to do. So what it did is it said, it's super easy. And I removed the restriction on that door so I can go through it now. So now I can go around, I can see people, I can look at this map here. And right now I'm going to try, let's do one brief thing. Now, this is actually a quest that I've been given, a mystery, which is where I would like to go with the game is there's a bunch of mysteries that you solve and you get through it and whatnot. Now there's some other characters. Where do I need to go to? I'm gonna reveal the entire map here so I can remind myself how to get to the Joyous Cafes through the Tranquility Pool. So where am I? I'm here. Go back to the Archive Lounge. And Joyous Cafe. Now you can see the amusement. Let's see if this works. It shouldn't be hard because it's allowed to create descriptions that take time. Here it's taken 30 minutes past. People still aren't here. I thought, oh, I guess I need to wait another 30 minutes for lunch. This one invokes probably an examine. So each of these things, as you move around, these are actually LLM generated as well. So they take into account the way the room is described in the basic game state, and then whatever's happening, like these characters and what they might be doing there. And I'm going to wait. it didn't give me another 30 minutes. I don't know. Might be a bug there. How do I make time actually pass? Oh, it really doesn't want me to do this. Well, I could talk to people. There are some like sillier places. One of them is the archive console, which I have set up um, as like a fake computer interface that you can interact with. Um, it's supposed to actually turn it, yeah, turn this into things, and it has. Oh, it's very open there. Okay, I'll quickly go to lunch. Once people get together for lunch, you'll find that they tend to chat with each other. Apparently, I just need to like. Um, None of this is causing enough time to pass, but once enough time does pass, everyone goes to lunch, and you can all watch them chatter with each other terribly long. They're very chatty and tend to go off in their own kind of crazy directions. Of course, every character has been um, made neurotic because that's more entertaining. Um, but to give an idea of people's schedules, you can look at these people. They're each assigned a schedule in the beginning of the day. So here is Lily's schedule here, including some like secret activities. So during this time, Lily's in the secret garden and is doing something that she's trying to keep secret from everyone else. The whole thing is in an underground bunker where everyone is kind of tightly together. So the idea is everyone has these like weird things. Um, this is the uh, mystery plot element, which initially the mystery like doesn't exist as far as you know, and then eventually it's revealed, and you can go through and you can eventually solve it. And each of these people have different locations. Um, and here is, I had to unlock that door. Um, that's what happened there. Uh, so yeah, I'm going to show some of how this game actually works. Um, so here's the repository. It's GPL licensed. It's written in TypeScript, Next.js. It's deployed on Vercel. You don't really have to use the Gemini key. Um, some idea of the different pieces of it. Uh, but the game state, there's kind of three main, well, the model, the classes, which are each of these entities and kind of how they work. Um, there's specific instances of the entities, which are everything is instantiated in this game object. It's not a pronounceable thing. In some of these ones, you'll notice they're just generic people, right? So, um, but they're actually like named objects that are typed and stuff. So you can kind of get that aspect. uh, and yeah, so we have these are those two like the character description. It should really be wrapping. I don't know why GitHub should wrap. And then like how to roleplay these. I created all these in conjunction with ChatGPT. So we talked them through. I made a bunch of characters, and then kind of at the end, after doing that, I gave it this code template, and I said, okay, turn these each into um, these kinds of code. Uh, so we have generic people. Um, we have some special people, which let's see. Ama is a special person. Player is a character. It's just an object as well, but it's a special one. The narrator is kind of like the thing that makes things happen, that's not assigned to any individual person. So some of those, that initial, if you go back to this is done by the narrator, um, these room descriptions are done by the narrator and such. Um, oops, where's my game objects? Here we go. And so that's all the um, people, and then there's rooms down here. Um, So rooms again. I tried to keep the name and the ID generally as close as possible. I don't want to give the LLM a lot of like translations to do. Um, so I want to uh, try to try to be good at that. Um, there are soundtracks as well, which are a little bit broken, but I should just remove the features so that they actually work properly. Um, and then sometimes you can have extra things. So like here's to say when you are in the foyer, if you remember the locking thing, there is a bit of extra um, prompt for Amma. So when you are in there and this is true, then this will be added to the prompt. If you see this here, this is a tag template, which is just like a little mini templating language that I use in a lot of places. It does dedenting and some conditionals and some other things. Um, and there's any other interesting ones. Here you can see also, if you look at the exits, here's a restriction on this exit uh, that keeps you from getting around. Um, so that's like the initial game state, and as you see, like these are all things that get patched by some of those different things that you saw, like the sets. Um, and here is the classes that are being instantiated there. So um, this is the abstract class that everything in the um, world has, is a subclass of this. So this is like the standard attributes that everything has. Um, and then let's see, what else do we got here? Rooms, everything has locations. Here's the code for like applying changes. Um, we can look actually here. I go in here and model. So this is like all the things that have happened. So we'll just say, and if we look at like the last one, uh, this happened. The narrator runs some of these scheduling things, so it's kind of not interesting. Let's look at here is June did something. She said something here, right? And then there can be changes. There wasn't any changes here, but this is like attribute changes. So if we look at like right in the beginning, maybe like there, this is where probably my name was set. And no, maybe not there. There? Not there either. Well, if we look at one of these, we'll see that different ones of these have like changes that happen. It's just a narrator, and these are just people moving around for the most part. Right, so this is like little attributes that get changed here. But like changing the player name and things like that happen as part of that stream. So the classes, each of these, yeah, gets instantiated and updated. Um, and then this has, I guess the important part here is all these LLM prompts that happen. There's also like you can override, you can listen to events that happen in the story and so on. This is the one that takes the history and trims it down to just the history from this entity's perspective, which is mostly about like what happened in the same room and things like that. Um, things like fold history, take adjacent uninteresting things and fold them into one thing, or get rid of things that didn't really matter. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of different kind of details here about how the prompts are put together. This execute prompt is a big one. Assemble prompt actually creates the prompt, which is another really big important one. Um, and and then there's like lots of overrides and different things that you can do. Um, the let's see what are some of the other parts. The world is like the set of all games or of all entities at the moment in time. Um, so this basically just has a list of the entities as they exist now, the list of the entities in the original state, and it's kind of the big container for everything. Um, schedules, these are, again, explicit schedules that I put together for each of the characters, uh, where it says, this is what, well, this is what happens in Intra in general. This is what happens June's schedule, which involves like a few different times. She wakes up at 6 a.m., sometimes a little bit later, but not longer. Uh, it takes about 30 minutes for her to do her things. She wakes up in her own room, and so on. And there's some flexibility there. There can be some overlapping, and so like when you saw that instantiation here, it takes the schedule template essentially and um, comes up with like exact times for each of these things, as well as when there's overlapping ones, it basically like rolls the die and picks one of them. Um, you'll see there's also the opportunity to say like to override the schedule. I believe if we look at one of these prompts here, um, so if we go to log and look at June's prompt, we'll see that unlike Amma, who's always everywhere, and this is so it should be an opportunity for the character, for instance, to choose not to leave or to choose to leave. And I am not seeing that, so I'm a little unclear if I'm um, stuff. There's not that much information here. maybe it's at the top, um, but you can continue with the conversation and stuff, and doesn't get overridden by the schedule. So all this kind of like state creates like individual perspectives. It creates a certain grounding to the world. Um, oh, here it is. Um, she is doing this particular activity, which involves trying to suppress uh, her frustration if someone talks to her. Um, and in this case, she's trying to be secretive about it. And I guess actually only only if she's about to finish the activity will there be a prompt there that says you don't have to finish the activity. So we try not to like give instructions about things that it can actually do. Um, and then there's these mysteries, right? So there's an active mystery, and uh, June knows about the active mystery, and um, this is kind of like the secret information that if you start asking her about it. So I only have one mystery, which is this Ink and Echo one. Ideally, there would be a whole series of mysteries that'll get you through until you eventually learn the reality of this place and what's happening, and then uh, I do have a plot where it would eventually save the world, but is not implemented in any way. Um, so those are some of the core things. I'm seeing if there's anything else here that's like particularly interesting. Um, say the world, the classes are where all the kind of interesting code is. The game objects are where all the um, and some of this is like specific to the intro game, right? Because the way Amma behaves is like specific behavior. Um, and then this is all the specifically instantiated things. And together that makes the whole game. So you could take those You could modify them. You could create different plot lines and stuff, and try to create a different game out of it all. Um, and then finally, there's a here's the actual UI, which is almost entirely inside this one file, uh, and it's a very long file. But I mean, the cool part about it, even though it's a very long file, the file is connected to actual UI. So you can kind of anything you see in the interface will map to different pieces, right? There's this thing, and so it's pretty concrete in that case, which I think, even though it's very long and involved, it does give you a lot. And it's fully reactive. It uses preact signals, so as the game state updates, it just kind of automatically updates all these things. And yeah, that's the game. I will put a link to the repository in here and a few other kind of things I've been doing. Thank you.